Welcome back to the channel. This is Wes. Not too long ago, Mark Millar, the man behind Millarworld, Kick-Ass, The Kingsman, King of Spies, all that good stuff that you love on the indie comic scene, said that he had gone out and essentially poached the best comic book artists from DC Comics as well as Marvel, because he thought that would only be fair. If he was going to take one, he had to take the other. There was a lot of speculation out there, and we finally learned the identities of these artists and their projects. They are, in fact, Jorge Jimenez from DC Comics and Pepe Larraz from Marvel Comics. These are enormous gets for Mark Millar and Millarworld. Now, we do know that Mark Millar has exquisite taste when it comes to comic book artists. When you look at the artists that he's worked with in the past, you talk about John Romita Jr., Steve McNiven, Dave Gibbons, John Paul Leone, Frank Quitely, Sean Gordon Murphy, Eric Canetti, Greg Capullo, Olivier Copio, Stuart Immonen, Matteo Scalera, among others. So the man has good taste, and apparently he has his finger on the pulse of modern comics and modern comic artists, because he was able to spot that Jorge Jimenez and Pepe Larraz are both amazing. Specifically, when you talk about Pepe Larraz, Eric Canetti, friend of the channel, great artist that's worked with Mark Millar in the past, describes him as a hyper-carry artist, essentially saying no matter what script you give him, it will be better because you put Pepe Larraz on it, because he's such a good comic book artist. Jorge Jimenez, absolutely brilliant artist, doing great things on Batman. These are obviously good gets, and this is what Mark Millar had to say about the two newest members of the Millarworld family. I'm in love with these guys and have been sending them fan mail for years. Jorge, I think, is the best Batman artist of this century, and Pepe is, in my opinion, the greatest X-Men artist of all time. If you're going to steal, steal big, so I went for Marvel's biggest player and DC's top dog. Having them over here at Netflix with us is an absolute treat. They're both deep in their respective projects, and we'll be releasing some of the art as previews in the back of our current Magic Order and Prodigy series. One of the rules in business and entertainment is never overpromise and underdeliver. I like the cut of Mark Millar's jib here, where he promised big, but he delivered probably even bigger than some people could have imagined. Obviously, there was speculation and rumors out there that Jorge Jimenez and Pepe Larraz could be the artists he was talking about. It only made sense. In a lot of people's minds, those are the best artists out there, and he absolutely delivered huge. What enormous gets for Millarworld, and what enormous losses for DC and Marvel. I don't know that these are full-time losses. Are they exclusive to Millarworld? I'm not really sure. I should be talking to Mark Millar, I believe, on Thursday. That also came out, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. He's going to come on the channel. We'll have an interview. So I've definitely got some questions about the big acquisitions. But make no mistake about it. These are game-changing acquisitions within the comic book industry. In the past, DC and Marvel were where the big artists wanted to be because they had the best paychecks and they had the most high-profile projects and characters and whatnot. But we've definitely seen a sea change within the comic book industry. And it appears when you look at the people that Mark Millar has worked with in the past, there's definitely something there that attracts great artists. I imagine he's easy to work with. He delivers great scripts with tons of action, gives his artists a great opportunity to shine, whatever you're on a Mark Millar book. But I imagine he also pays quite well. So these are big things. Now let's talk about the projects that they're both on. And this is really, really exciting stuff. Mark Millar's Nemesis is returning for a new series with Batman artist Jorge Jimenez in January of 2023. Coming from Millarworld, Millar's personal division at Netflix, Millar and Steve McNiven created Nemesis in 2010 as a creator-owned limited series published by Icon Comics. The series follows a Batman-like supervillain named Nemesis as he sets his sights on bringing mass chaos, destruction, and death to Washington, D.C. Well, I can't imagine you're going to find a better modern artist to do a Batman-like character with these kind of weird, dark undertones. You know who Mark Millar is as a writer. He cuts no quarters. He takes changes with his characters, and he does push the envelope as far as storytelling. You know, he did Red Sun. That was definitely an interesting take on Superman. One of the better Elseworld stories you're ever going to read involving Superman. He did Marvel Civil War. He might not have invented the heroes fighting heroes trope within comic books, but he certainly perfected it on that storyline, which I'm a big fan of. Obviously, Old Man Logan, he definitely has a feel for what comic book fans like when he was at Marvel and DC, and it's definitely transferred over to the independent comic scene. There are few people in the comic book industry today that have a better grasp on what the actual audience wants than Mark Millar, and bringing Jorge Jimenez on a project like this is absolutely perfect. He's the best artist that you could find to do a character like this. And the best part is, you know Mark Millar is going to do his damnedest to make sure that he is utilizing Jorge Jimenez and his exquisite artistic talents on this comic book. You're going to see tons of action, you're going to see tons of gore, you're going to see things that you probably never seen being produced from the pencils of Jorge Jimenez in this series. This is very exciting, and I'm shocked he was able to make it even more exciting with the next announcement. Mark Millar and Pepe the Raz are teaming up for Big Game, a new crossover series from Millarworld. While details are limited at this time, Millarworld said Big Game is rumored to be a crossover between many, if not all, of the Millarworld franchises. The series will launch in the spring of 2023. The Millarworld account on Twitter confirming some of these rumors, at least acknowledging them, is probably a good hint that that's going to happen. But think about the characters and franchises that could be put into this crossover. Kick-Ass, Hit Girl, Wanted, Kingsman, Jupiter's Legacy, Superior, The Magic Order, most recently King of Spies, and a whole lot more, because he's done so much phenomenal work on the indie comic book scene. Would you think about creators out there who would do a good job on a book like this, where you're taking these characters from these different, what felt like universes, and bringing them in for a big crossover? Yeah, I think Pepe the Raz just might be the artist that you're looking for. You go back and look at what he did with House of X and how his art really helped launch all that excitement around Jonathan Hickman's big relaunch of X-Men. There are so many characters from different parts of the Marvel universe that were in that. Obviously, it's a lot of mutants, but it was a lot of other things too. Lots of other heroes. You had the Fantastic Four and stuff like that. Pepe the Raz is used to working with a wide variety of heroes and putting them all in the same story together and making them look like they belong together. This is a really, really good eye for talent and understanding the talents of the artists involved here. There's no way that Mark Millar just accidentally said, who would be a good Nemesis artist? Maybe it's Jorge Jimenez. You know, he'd probably been scouting him for years. Same thing with Pepe the Raz on Big Game. You don't think that he noticed that Pepe the Raz was pretty much an expert at weaving different characters into one story and making it feel really enormous and big? Mark Millar is promising that there's even bigger news on the horizons. Huge news number 3, our boldest announcement yet. You won't be ready for this. Marvel and DC won't be ready for this, and retailers are going to lose their minds with sheer joy. The Millarworld Twitter account followed up with, CBR is going to be breaking this story, talking about that series and the big news there on Thursday, and Mark will be doing an interview with Thinking Critical immediately after. Stay tuned for more details. And in that original tweet, we see this cover for a comic book called Night Watch, which it appears to be a vampire book, and I guess the rumor is here that it's going to be vampires who want to be superheroes. Is the big news Greg Capullo? Obviously, he's the artist on the cover of this. That certainly would be big news, but I have a feeling, I have an idea of what this big news could be, and I think people are going to be over the moon, not just with what Night Watch is and the premise behind it, but the big news that's going to be accompanying it, because Mark Millar is absolutely going to deliver. He said he was going to poach off the best artist at DC and Marvel, and he was going to tell you about it, and he absolutely delivered on that. And he says this is going to be bigger news. And I think fans and retailers are going to be very excited about that, and we're going to be talking about it right here on the channel. I'm very excited. This is something that's on my bucket list, something I never really thought I would be able to have the chance to do here on the channel. A one-on-one interview with Mark Millar, talking about some big breaking news that he's delivering that day. It's going to be a lot of fun. Hopefully we get to talk a little bit about some of his other comics too, because I do have some other questions, but it's quite the honor. When I have more details about exactly what we're going to be doing with this interview, is it going to be live? What time is it going to come up? I will definitely let you guys know so you won't miss it. But I'm over the moon. I'm very excited. Mark Millar is an agent of change in the comic book industry, and a good agent of change. He's making other companies out there and other comic book creators up their game. With the history and characters and universes that Marvel and DC have, they shouldn't be playing catch up to Millarworld. You know, Mark Millar is only one man. He writes all the comic books himself, but they absolutely are. He's delivering every single time he puts out a comic book series. He's always got the best artists. The stories are engrossing. They're action-packed. And I cannot wait for this big news going to be talking about right here on the channel. I have talked about Mark Millar on the channel before. I actually had a discussion with Joe Corallo and Eric Breed on here, how he's essentially the new blueprint for comic books and comic book success in the industry. Definitely check this out for a career retrospective of Mark Millar.